And critical race theory, saying you'll never be accepted? Oh my God. Microaggressions everywhere. So every time you're standing there and you've got this scowl on your face, and every time somebody looks at you, oh, they're just racist against me. No, they don't like you because you look hostile.
Welcome to the Reality Therapy Podcast, where the truth will set you free.
Welcome. My guest today is Dr. Dina McMillan, who's a social psychologist and also contributor to this book, Cynical Therapies. And I'm super excited to have you on. So welcome, doctor.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
So let's start off talking about your kind of primary research on domestic violence. Actually, sorry, let me back up before that. Let's get to know you a little bit. What is your background? Where you come from?
I'm a military kid. So I have to tell you, and I just kept going. In a previous era, if I'd been a boy, I would have been the son that went to sea. So I have lived in 5 countries, 9 states in the U.S. I am used to being in all sorts of different environments. And a lot of people are well-traveled. It's a whole different thing, though, when you go and live in another country. So I went to high school in Germany, which caused me to always be early for all of my appointments.
And you're early today.
And I have a real aversion to things that don't work efficiently. It's like, if it doesn't work, why don't you fix it? I've lived in England, which caused me to develop an absolute addiction to tea. I need a support group, okay? I've lived in France. I went to college in France. And just even now, I can just visualize, just walking to class in the morning with that golden light over the Seine. It was just absolutely beautiful. I've lived in Australia. And as I said, I was born in North Carolina, but I've lived all over the states. My home state now is California.
So first of all, when Helen Pluckrose was on here, she taught me how to make a proper cup of tea. So maybe if we have time at the end, you can tell me what your secret to making a good cup of tea is. But I think it's so... Oh, go ahead.
I would never try to outdo the English, okay?
But I think it's so interesting that you've lived in and experienced so many of these different cultures, and then you ended up being a social psychologist. That's got to inform your thinking a lot.
Well, I think the social psychology came about because when you move to a new place, you're an outsider. And it gave me a level of objectivity in what I was observing, and I was curious to know more. I'm seeing all different aspects of human behavior. And I initially started as an undergrad to study psychology. Then I took a social psychology course, and I need to explain to your audience because a lot of people don't know what social psychology is. It's not sociology mixed with psychology. What it is, we study how the brain works, but we also study how people are influenced and persuaded and manipulated and coerced and indoctrinated and brainwashed. So I belong to the evil science. We are the ones who get you to buy things you don't really need, or if we work in politics, we get you to vote for someone you don't really trust. That's what we do. I decided to go on the side of the angels, though, and use it to actually help people, not to try to sell people things.
There's probably a lot to unpack there. And from what I've read of you, you seem to be the one helping people understand how they're being manipulated.
Yes, I have a show right now. It's live streamed on the East Coast of the U.S. It's 1:00 in the morning for my UK friends. Some of them actually still attend the live stream. It's 10 a.m. on the East Coast of Australia. Got a lot of people there too. But at 8 p.m., so all the differences. So it's 5 p.m. in California, but it's across the country, live stream every Tuesday night. And it's on, I posted on my X site. It's on X. It's on Daily Clout, Rumble, Facebook, Getter. And the show is called Heart and Mind with Dr. Dina McMillan. And my whole goal is to deconstruct a lot of what's going on in society to make people manipulation proof so that they can actually identify how we're being led to believe things, to do things, to buy things that are not in our best interest.
That is really interesting. So what's something that I would encounter kind of in my daily life, as a consumer, that I'm being manipulated and I don't know it?
Relationships. One of the things I've noted and we talk about, because of course it's heart and mind, so I talk about actual manipulation, but I also talk about emotional issues on the show. And last couple of weeks, I've been talking about the rules. So I've basically been offering first general rules on ways to behave, ways to treat yourself, character traits that you can adopt to improve all of your relationships. And then last week, we were talking about the rules for better romantic relationships. And that's one place where I've really seen a problem. If you look at anything made after 2005, notice how aggressive the women are. The women are aggressive, hypersexual, foul-mouthed. The men are all weak, apologetic. The women are always smarter than the men. So even if they show like a police situation, law enforcement situation, the boss is always female. And they don't ever talk about in real life when they put a lot of women in these situations, they are terrible at the job. We need additional training to be effective leaders because our natural nurturing instincts can stand in the way when you're talking about a protective organization, which slots naturally for male predispositions, not female. Most females are not predisposed to be protective. They're not predisposed to hold somebody accountable who's crying in front of them. Most of the time we feel sympathy, and women tend to feel sympathy, whatever their job, for whoever's crying in front of them. Men will stand back and say, yeah, he's crying now, but look what he did. He needs to be held accountable or he'll do it again. It's the traditional dad role, right?
Yeah.
But you just don't see smart men in charge on 95% of the shows that you see.
So help me understand what's going on, because I don't like to be too conspiratorial, but it seemed just like almost overnight you see this like television shows, movies, TV commercials. What you're describing, what kind of this gender role inversion, it just kind of completely took over. Like, what happened there?
Well, I think that since the 60s, when we had a lot of Marxists actually take over the universities, and it's ripe fodder because in America, and a lot of people, if your audience is international, excuse me if I explain things, but some of my international people don't know this. A lot of universities in the States, we tend to leave home at 18. We go to a university, and the university, the professors and the administration there become our de facto parents because we're still kids. So they have enormous power over their students. So you fill that with Marxists who are trying to destroy the Western system, and you look at what they're being taught about, and they put really nice labels on it. Diversity, inclusion, all of these things. But if you look at what they're really promoting, it's the destruction of the nuclear family. It's the disrespect and therefore allowing our overall culture to be destroyed because you've been taught that it's evil and wrong and bad. It was very cleverly done. Whoever's in charge must have read Sun Tzu, because Sun Tzu in The Art of War talks about how smart it is to conquer someplace without firing a shot, without actually using weapons. And that's what they did. The indoctrination became really heavy. I mean, for your audience, think about it. When was the last time you saw a TV program or a film with a really smart guy that was large and in charge and unapologetic about it? One of the only ones I can think of is Chicago PD. But even then, from about 2008, when 18, when the woke really started taking over, I've had to start skipping episodes because just, and you look at the people underneath the head guy, they have that same inverted dynamic that we're discussing, where the women are all smarter than their husbands. The guys are always apologizing. It's the women who decide everything. When they make mistakes, they're never held accountable for it. It's terrible. There's only one reason you can do that, and that is because you want to destroy what we have. Because you have to notice, when you have more than 50% of young women diagnosed with some sort of mental illness, you have half of young people on some kind of antidepressant or anxiolytic, you have to notice something's wrong. So I can't say it's unintentional. Unintentional mistakes are corrected as soon as they're recognized. This has been going on for decades.
So you talk about, I mean, there's this explosion in new diagnoses of mental illness and, antidepressant use and all these different types of things. That shift in culture with, like, you talk about television programming and gender roles and these things, like, certainly has to be a contributing factor. Like, what else is causing this? Because it seems like alarming, this increase in mental illness.
Well, you also have, what you have with the left progressive, and there's a psychopathologist called J.D. Haldigan, and I've had him on my show. I was thrilled because he doesn't have a huge number of people to comment on his stuff, probably because he's so smart that they're like, oh, I don't want to say anything. I don't care. I had him on my show because he's talked about the pathocratic suppression of society, a subversion of society. Pathocratic subversion is when you have a small group of deviant people, people with issues, people that are not going to, they have attitudes, behaviors, beliefs, lifestyle that are not going to help society thrive, but somehow they take over. And they take over by making themselves first seem harmless and then seem superior, and then everybody else is supposed to look away from logic and ration. It's total 1984. It's George Orwell. You look away from the outcomes. You're not supposed to look and say, well, wait a minute, why are you guys so miserable? And how come your families aren't happy? And then, of course, when you have wealthy people supporting this, they fund research with terrible methodology, but that gets published. And the message goes through. Social scientists know if you stand against the system, you don't get funding and you could lose your job. So you have to quote and repeat and parrot whatever the left progressive says is true. It's scary.
Yeah, it just seems so bizarre, that aspect of the research. And, I'm sure about, like, the replication crisis, and, that has to be in part or maybe largely influenced by this heavy political bias in the research. What do you see there?
Well, yeah, again, it's people, and the average person. I was in college or university for all my Australian and UK people for 9 years. 7 of those 9 years, I was studying research analysis, statistical analysis. I can read anybody's research. Now, I may have to look up the terms like I did during COVID, but I know enough about research to be able to tell if it's rigorous research or absolute crap. I can also tell when the discussion at the end is politically driven and not supported by the actual data, which you see a lot of as well. That's why it's not replicable, because it's not supported by their own data. But they'll say whatever will continue to get them funding, will get them an article in the New York Times or Washington Post, whatever supports the narrative. And I know it sounds conspiracy theory. It's insane. This is not how I intended to live my life. I spend a lot of time defending white people. Now, as somebody who grew up experiencing real racism, as somebody who can even spot real racism that exists today, who doesn't pretend it's not there anymore. If you told me when I was a young kid, when we integrated an all-white neighborhood, and there were young boys on bicycles coming behind our car the first time we went to look at the house saying, "Get out, niggers." If you told me, "Oh, by the way, when you're in middle age, you're going to be defending white people," I would have thought you were crazy, but I have to. It's an attack. It is a full-blown pack just attacking white people, attacking men. It's horrible. And it's not a conspiracy theory. One of the things about facing racism at university, I had a horrible experience at Stanford University. I faced so much discrimination from my professors, I could still sue them. But one good thing about being discriminated against, you become very rigorous in what you say. You know you have no wiggle room. So you have to be able to back up everything you say. So everything I'm saying here, I can back up with research. And there is a concerted effort to destabilize our society by knocking the feet out from males, especially white males, putting women in charge who are overly emotional, personality disorders, depressed, whatever, making them as insecure as possible. And our whole society is just ripe for the plucking by an outside enemy. That's what the plan is.
Can you walk me through your personal psychology of growing up as a child, experiencing this like horrible racism, experiencing racist discrimination in college, and then you kind of come to this perspective as an adult, later on, where you're like, I need to defend white people. I think that seems like a huge contrast.
Well, what it is this. First of all, God bless my mother, where I hope she's here. I shouldn't talk about her because I'll still get teary. But one of the things my mother, in spite of having faced terrible discrimination as a very dark-skinned Black woman, she taught us there's a difference between ignorance and hatred. Sometimes people will say or do things that seem, discriminatory or derogatory because they don't know any better. They're not really attacking you. This is just what they heard, what they know. They don't know any better. Those guys that were on the bicycles, saying, "Get out, niggers," fast forward a year later, they were all our friends. This is just what they've been taught by adults. Once they got to know us, they became our friends. And some of their parents actually became friends with my parents because my mother left the door open. She said, there's a difference. And the person who you think is your enemy because they say something, if you get to know each other, you never know, could end up being your friend. My mother left that door open. So, facing discrimination, but I also dealt with white people who really put a lot on the line to help me. So it wasn't all one thing. And I made a decision years ago that I was going to be a facts, not feelings social scientist. So I had to replace one of my dissertation advisors because I wrote my dissertation on the non-financial cost of being on welfare. So I'm looking at long-term welfare recipients, and I'm looking at things like amount of conflict they have with other people, how many people they're close with, if they have any hope about the future. So I'm looking at interpersonal, perceptual ideas and ways of dealing with your life. And I'm comparing people that are low-wage people, so they have about the same income. But one group is working, the other group is receiving welfare. And the welfare people were doing much worse. And a woman, dissertation advisor, didn't even want me looking at it. So she thought I'd back down. Instead, I'd replaced her. I always had to,
Yeah. With your dissertation, someone like economist Thomas Sowell has done a lot of work on the kind of the economic side of welfare. And that's so fascinating to me that you look at the non-material type of conditions. That's so interesting. Could you flesh that out a little bit more for me?
Well, because I've read so many studies showing, and it's funny, it's welfare recipients and trust fund kids. Same problem. When
Really?
you have money coming in to support your life that you don't have to work for, you don't have to cooperate, you don't wake up in the morning with a sense of purpose, it actually causes the breakdown of your mental health, your social bonds, whatever. What do you think so many trust fund kids, it end up an absolute mess?
It's funny you say that. My background, what I do is work in addiction treatment, and I've seen a lot of people who have well-off families who love them to death. You know, they're addicted to drugs, and they just keep giving them more and more money, and it's like a death sentence. You know, and so I think that's fascinating that people on the very high end and the very low end are kind of experiencing some of the same things.
Absolutely. And I looked at this research and I said, why hasn't anybody brought it over? Because it's not politically correct to look. And so, but I just, again, facts, not feelings. So I actually looked, and the differences, when I ran the analysis, the differences weren't just statistically significant. In many cases, they were dramatic. When you look at things like conflict and hopelessness and things like that, there was a dramatic difference between the working poor and the welfare recipient.
Wow.
So you're not winning. So you have all those people now on social media bragging about how much money they get for food stamps and how many groceries they buy, and they have families in there dancing around. Oh, our check came so we can buy all these groceries. They don't realize what they're paying. Nobody tells them. So I've always been willing to look at inconvenient truths. And I mean, some of the discrimination I faced at Stanford wasn't just because I was Black and didn't put my race on my application, because I didn't want anybody to say I got in because I was Black. They were surprised when I showed up. But what surprised them even more is that some of the major factors that influence interaction, they had misjudged. So they used to do experiments on us. I didn't find out until I was graduating, but they used to do experiments on the grad students. And I was told that I mucked up their data because I tested like a white male. They weren't taking into account the fact that I'm 5'11". So being tall, you interact with the world differently than when you're short. They didn't take into account the fact that I'd been a model in Paris and New York. I made my living off my looks. Being attractive is one of the most discriminated groups, and nobody talks about that either. So I was used to, when I'm dealing, I'd lived in all these places. I was used to making my way around people who didn't look like me, think like me. I hadn't known all my life. They took none of that into account. So they just see a Black person, they expect me to have a mindset like I grew up in a ghetto. I've never lived in a ghetto. And I lived in places where being Black was an absolute advantage. Because I stood out, in Australia, stood out like a sore thumb. And it was a huge advantage. People wanted to talk to me because I was different, you know?
That's so interesting that you faced kind of these two different forms of discrimination. There's that people using openly ethnic slurs against you as a kid or like in college. And then there's this, I think what economist Glenn Loury would call the soft bigotry of low expectations. You know, people kind of infantilizing you from like a progressive side of like trying not to be bigoted, but ending up being bigoted anyway.
I have an easier time, and I've always had an easier time. I'm not surprised I ended up among the conservatives, because I've always had an easier time with people who were not willing to give me a break. So I knew how to prove myself. And most of those people, if you prove yourself to them, are willing to give you a shot. Most of the time, it's based on stereotypes, and stereotypes are based in fact. 9 times out of 10, when somebody looks like me, stands in front of them, they have certain characteristics. But if they were willing to deal with that one who was different, then we got along fine. With the left wingers, they wanted to put me in a small, limited, victimized, grateful box. And if I didn't fit that, they became very aggressive. Still do. I get called all kinds of names. I keep trying to follow left wingers on social media, and I keep having to block them because as soon as I disagree with them about anything, they start cursing at me and calling me names and saying my credentials are fake and just becoming so abusive. When I disagree with conservatives, like Charlie Kirk goes around saying there's no such thing as white privilege, that's absolutely asinine. Of course there is. When you walk into a room, how people interact with you is based on stereotypes and their perception of what your group, who your group is. So of course, whether you get interrupted or not, whether you get questioned or not, whether people look you in the eye, whether people look at you and smile, whether they'll initiate a conversation, all of that is based on bias. I have a course called Healing the Rift, where I talk about bias, what bias costs you, how to get rid of it, but in no way, form, or fashion do I try to get people to become stupid and not pay attention to what they see and hear and experience. And I don't force people to have left-wing ideals at all, because of course I don't believe in them. So
I'm wondering if you could help me out with something, because I've been frustrated. I'm finishing up a master's of clinical mental health counseling program, and I've been really frustrated with kind of the multicultural approach to things, because I feel like a lot of the education is kind of like whiteness is a bad thing, whiteness is problematic, therefore you should have left-wing views. And a lot of the conservatives kind of don't want to talk about like multiculturalism at all. And it seems like actually talking about multiculturalism kind of gets ignored. And you're saying like there really is a lot of a nuanced discussion to be had here. If you were advising me as a heterosexual white male therapist heading into, become a counselor, how would you advise me from that multicultural angle?
well, first of all, I would work on your confidence, because I see incredible discrimination against whites and against white males. I am still trying to find an aspect of left-wing ideology that I actually agree with that would be backed up by science. I have yet to find it. Multiculturalism doesn't work. And I even got criticized recently on social media because I used an example from the Bible, but I used it as a parable. So even non-religious people would get it. Okay? I talked about the towers of Babylon, and I talked about the tower. What is it? Babel?
Tower of Babel, yeah.
Yeah, Tower of Babel. And I talked about how when humans became too arrogant and tried to replicate God, God said, "You're not going to do this," and made them all speak different languages so that they could not effectively work together to complete the project. That's how it is in life. We need to be, multiculturalism, it's important to understand the culture of whom you're dealing with. I work all over the world, as I mentioned. I have to understand the culture of what I'm dealing with. When they say multiculturalism, what they mean is Western culture bad, everybody else good. I have no white guilt. I have no rose-colored glasses. So it's up to people like me to stand up and say, multiculturalism for the most part doesn't work. Unless people share 95% of their cultural values, and that includes religion, the issues between the groups are permanent. So we need to be really careful whom we allow in our countries. We need to be really careful about bending over backwards for these other cultures. They moved to the West. We did not move there. They are the ones who need to adapt. By telling us we need to adapt, all you're doing is making an absolute mess. And as I said, though, anytime I'm in a group, if I'm dealing with the different parts of the U.S., The South doesn't think like the North. The North doesn't think like the Upper West. You go to Massachusetts and Maine, all that snow has done something to their minds. Sorry. But so you have to adapt. That's multiculturalism to me. But to say that I have to pretend all cultures are equally healthy, no. You can't pay me enough to lie. No.
You bring up a very interesting question about that, and I've heard people say that before, and it's really thought-provoking that you can have like a multiracial society, but you can't have a cohesive multicultural society. What do you do in contemporary America where Christianity's on the decline? We've got, atheism and a number of other religions as well. We've got all different kinds of political views. We've got all kinds of divergent cultural beliefs. How do you have a cohesive society in America?
You don't. And I tell you what, Christianity is on the rise, and it's on the rise with young people, because one of the first things they did in the West in order to be able to invade and destroy was remove religion. And they did it in a very clever way. They had the intellectuals, because intellectuals always like to feel superior. You scratch an intellectual, you get somebody very insecure. So you get these intellectuals and you tell them that, and you give them examples of all these really smart people who are atheists. So by role models and by example, you're teaching people that smart people don't believe in God. So by doing that, even if you use Christianity as a social guide, you lose all of that. When you tell people that really smart, clever, open-minded people are not Christian, they don't have religious views, they don't believe in God, and everything you look at supports that. Every show, every film. I mean, you have people like in the British. That's why they've been able to be invaded so effectively. They removed their Christianity from them. And when people don't have religion, they don't realize how much your faith shapes your perception of the world, your sense of right and wrong, your family structure, your government, your business practices. So they'll just let anybody in. And they get people who have very strong faith, and they allow them to come in large numbers, and their faith says, you must convert to my faith or be destroyed. So the UK, if they don't fight back now, the UK is lost. Canada is lost through atheism. Again, when is the last time you saw a show where the lead person, the clever person, the one that the protagonist, the main protagonist, is unapologetically a person of faith?
You always see the dumb, bumbling, backwards, bigoted person being the Christian.
And that is a very powerful influence. And it's like, I look at, to get back to the inversion of traditional roles, I have never met so many unhappy women in my life. I have young neighbors coming to see me once they find out what I do. So I took a book that I started and hadn't finished, and I completed it. And it came out a year and a half ago. It's called Fascination with the Devil: Why Women Love Emotionally Dangerous Men. So they didn't just tell women to behave in ways that were antithetical to having a healthy relationship with a man. They also told them to admire and desire men who make absolutely horrendous partners and the relationships don't last. So I wrote a book showing them how they're being influenced, but the last chapter is called Ending the Fascination. So I give them the reader simple steps to actually change your taste. And I give them simple steps to being a good partner. When I am in a relationship, I am unapologetically the woman in the relationship. I do not want a woman that's in touch with a man in touch with his feminine side. He's a man, I treat him like one, I treat him with respect. I want a man who acts like a man. And oh my goodness, the women that sneak to my house, is hilarious. And we're talking 19, 20-year-old women. Because they're just not getting where they want to go from what they're being taught, and what the media is telling them is how they're supposed to behave. So I'm seeing all of this. It is just a mass destruction of we're losing all of our social guide to how to have a successful society that thrives, that lasts past you. Our goal is not just supposed to be us. It's supposed to be building something that our children can continue to build on. And that stopped being the case in the 60s, when it was like, if it feels good, do it. And it's all about you. And the feminist movement took over and said, you shouldn't be satisfied being a mom and a wife. You should. Yeah. And not only did they tell women, I agree that women have just as important a role as men. But I don't agree that empowering women means acting like bad men. And that's what they've done.
You know, you brought up this kind of relationship piece, and I'm wondering if that gets into some of your research on domestic violence, or if you could flesh that out for us.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the things that's happened is over the last, first of all, I have my program, Unmasking the Abuser, and any of your audience who are interested, I have a TED Talk. So you can actually hear me talk about my Unmasking the Abuser program, because it's unique in the world. And one of the things that I found so frustrating is that no matter who's in the White House, no matter who's, on the money in the UK and Australia, domestic violence rates have not gone down. My program is the only thing that will actually bring it down, because it actually shows you exactly what abusers do to psychologically manipulate and lure in and manipulate their targets. Now, one thing that has changed, while I say domestic violence hasn't gone down, it's gone up for one group, and that's men. This aggression that we're seeing promoted in the media over the last, I'd say, 10 years, domestic violence against men has actually gone up.
Wow.
It's a mess.
What do you think explains that increase in domestic violence against men?
Teaching women that to be empowered as a woman, you have to be like a beta, what I call an angry beta male. So you have to be competitive, hyper-aggressive. You have to be, that's what we're taught is empowerment as a woman. You look at any show that has a female protagonist, and within the first 5 scenes, she's telling off her boss in the rudest way possible, F-bombs dropping everywhere. They show how she's hypersexual with no accountability or repercussions. So teaching women that men are the enemy, and it's, in order to be empowered, you have to be aggressive against guys, and telling men, teaching boys and men that they are wrong to defend themselves, that they are wrong to tell her off, that they are wrong to just dump her, that a really good male, I'm a male feminist t-shirts on your hero is teaching men to be beta and weak. And on some level, those women who've been misguided into believing that empowerment means being just this aggressive woman, they are so disappointed in those men that it brings out aggression in them. It's almost like they're pushing him to see if he will actually stand up and be a man. So you have all the traditional things that caused problems. Women being seen as property by a subset of males. Now, again, a lot of people act like every guy is one beer away from being, a super abuser. That's not true. If you look at the guys that I explain and I psychologically show you the characteristics of an abusive male, it's between 8 and 10%. So 90% of men are not in this category at all. But they're carrying the water for those guys because it's rare for somebody who works in this field to ever say that. They make it sound like every guy is potentially abused. It's like every man is a potential rapist. No, they're not. Most guys are decent, but they don't get enough credit.
So I heard Jordan Peterson say something along the lines of, if you think strong men are dangerous, you should see what weak men are capable of. And it sounds like a second ago you were describing these abusive men as betas. Are these men who are more likely to be abusive? Do they like less alpha, more beta, like less successful? Is that part of the characteristic of these men?
Well, one of the things I did, and I actually did a show on this. So if anybody goes to my Heart and Mind show, I actually did a show on this because over the years, I've been gathering research for years, and I've differentiated men into different categories. And I have, at the top of the tree is what I call the true alpha male. But there are two other types of alpha. There's the alpha minor, who's almost as principled, almost as strong, really bright, has leadership potential, but he doesn't have the same level of protective instincts like a true alpha male. And then you have the alpha imitator. You've got the Tate brothers. So these guys are smart, clever, cunning, but also exploitative and selfish and dangerous. So that group of alphas can also be abusive. So you have two types of guys that are more likely to be the abusers. The alpha imitator, these are like the hyper controlling guys that have, they're usually bright, they're usually successful, but they are hyper controlling. So they have this coercive controlling relationship. And then there's the angry beta. An angry beta is usually a bright guy that's an underachiever because he doesn't take risks, or his personality isn't appealing enough to get people to follow him. And his idol is the alpha imitator. But because he's so angry and dissatisfied with life, these guys will often take advantage of anyone that they can exploit, and that includes their partner. So those are the two groups that populate the domestic violence abusers among males.
So can you dig into this a little more for me? How does that play into, I mean, there's so many words to describe this type of cluster of things, but red pill, manosphere, incels, men going their own way, like all this kind of stuff that's happening amongst men that generally leads to a lot of hatred of women.
That's usually the angry beta.
Gotcha.
Because you look at the fact that what happens is they aren't powerful enough to have the money to get women to ignore the fact that their danger shows. Now, it shows with the alpha imitator too, but they're often clever enough to offer rewards for getting involved with them, so they're able to get partners. But look how they treat their partners. They exploit them, they beat them, they're just terrible. But all of that but again, that group has grown because aggressive women have grown. When you're telling women the way to be empowered is to mistreat men, you're going to get some of those mistreated men to get really mad. And so you're going to grow that group where you have men and women at each other. And since the healthiest families are a married couple raising children together, it's socially destructive to encourage this kind of behavior.
Do you see women who have this, what seems like a really tough choice for them between like a relationship with a like angry alpha imitator or a beta nice guy? Like, do you see women kind of wrestling with that dichotomy?
Yes, I do. And I keep telling, that's why they need to read my book, because I talk about how you can get an alpha male. You don't have to settle for a beta in order to get away from the alpha imitator. I don't want you to get with an alpha minor either, because too much happens in life and you need a man who will protect you. It will erode your relationship. It'll be death of 1,000 cuts with an alpha minor because he doesn't have those protective instincts. I want women to be with alpha males, true alpha males. But in order to be a partner to a true alpha male, you have to be a true alpha female, which means that you have to embrace your femininity. You have to embrace your role as a woman. They do not want to marry another man. So if you're going to act like a guy, you're not for them. But they will treat their partners with respect of all the different types. The true beta, the passive beta, what I call compliant beta, and the true alpha are the most sexually loyal.
Wait, who are the most sexually loyal? Which ones?
The true alpha,
Uh-huh.
to the top of the tree and the bottom of the tree.
That's fascinating. Why do you think that is?
I think with the compliant beta that he bonds like a woman. And women tend to bond in a way where we don't necessarily say, oh, now I have him, let me have other partners. That's not how most women work. And then the true alpha, he has so many layers of bond with his partner that it's just, and he has a strong moral code and principles that he lives by. So he's just not out there shopping. Now he's and he has to be strong, because a true alpha male can walk in a room and everybody will notice. And it's so funny because it transcends social class. I actually did, years ago, I did a reality show. And we had 3 different families on the reality show. And one family was very upper class, lived in like this was in Australia, so a really elite part of Australia. Their son was well-educated, violinists, all that kind of thing. Then we had a working class family, and they had 4 kids, and their eldest son he was really bright, mechanic, but always thinking. He actually came up with a device to put on car engines that increases fuel efficiency and torque. He could still sell it, okay? So he's this really bright guy, but more than that, he's true alpha. So initially, the upper class guy figures, in this group of all these young people, approximately the same age, I'm going to be the one in the leadership position. That didn't even last a whole episode. Immediately, he started looking, when he said something, he started looking to the alpha male for confirmation that it was good. It was amazing to watch. Because usually you would think an upper class person would dominate a lower class or a working class person, but not in this case. And because it was filmed, you could see a lot of it if you watch the show. It was absolutely fascinating. So one of the things I've also done is put together a training program to train men to become true alpha. So when I did the show, I had people writing on the side, I want the training. Yes, I would like to offer it. But again, they need mates. They need women who are alpha females, who are strong but not bossy, who embrace their female role, the femininity, who are loyal, supportive, and fully appreciate the fact that they bagged an alpha male, and they need to treat him like he's valuable because he is. So if we had more alphas, true alphas in our society, we wouldn't be having all the social problems, because you can't convince a true alpha male to have white guilt. He's just not going to buy into it. He's going to look into it and say that's bull malarkey, although he might not say malarkey. I don't curse, but that's bull malarkey. He's going to look at it and say, no, far more true alpha males on the right than on the left. Far more.
Okay, you just touched into something really interesting. I saw a woman post on social media the other day, and it just like it triggered something in me. Very progressive woman, said, "I want a guy who looks like a Trump voter and votes Democrat." Like how can I find someone who like is that alpha male that I see amongst Republican men, but also politically thinks like me? I think a lot of Democrat women struggle with that.
Yeah, they do. Again, and sneak to my house. Yeah. Oh, can you help me with this? I had to write the book. So I published the book. You can find it on Amazon. Fascination with the Devil. Okay. It will actually show you what was done to make you have bad taste and how you fix it. I never talk about a problem without the fixing being, even on my show, always the last part's about how you fix it. I see that a lot because a true alpha male is nature's protector. Even if you look at animal groups. I mean, I had bunnies at one point, and they used to, and I didn't know if you know it, but with smart rabbits, you can actually litter box train them. I don't know if you know that, but
Really?
yeah.
My brother
And
used to have rabbits, and I don't think they were that smart.
well, they don't get smart from being in a cage. You've got to actually train them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I used to let them out on the balcony. And when they went out on the balcony, no matter what they were doing, I'd give them little treats and but no matter what they were doing, hawk goes by, bam, he stops whatever he's doing. He hits the ground, all of them run back inside. The true alpha, even among animals, he is the leader. He's the king of the jungle. He is the one that is nature's put in there to lead. And a leader cannot buy bull because it puts his people in danger. And the left progressive ideology is so full of crap. You start off with saying, when somebody looks different than you, all you know is that their ancestors came from either a hotter or a colder place. Okay? Check with the true alpha male. You are supposed to feel guilty about what your ancestors did to their ancestors, but they're not responsible for what they did last week. And a true alpha male is giving you the true alpha version of the side eye, okay? Because he's like, what planet are you from? No. And they don't have to be. Again, it is not based on social class. True alpha male qualities show whether he's formally educated or not, regardless of the job. They are nature's leaders, and we need to put them in charge.
That's very fascinating. Before we go any further, I wanted to go get into your contribution to this book, Cynical Therapies. I love this book. You co-wrote a couple chapters with Dr. Carol Sherwood, and
Yes.
she's been on the show as well. And what you wrote was so fascinating. It was really inspiring to me. And before you get into what you wrote, I just want to personally thank you. I was in my first semester of graduate school. When I picked up this book, I had no clue what was going on. I was so confused, so frustrated. Is there something wrong with me? I don't know what's going on. And I started reading this book that you and others, wrote and contributed to. And it's it makes sense. I don't think I'm the crazy one anymore, So thank you for that. But that being said, can you tell me about what you wrote?
Okay, well, it was Carol's idea. So Dr. Carol Sherwood, what happened is all the other contributors to that are clinical psychologists. I'm a social psychologist, so my field is a little different. Although I do some consulting, I don't do therapy. So I'm not a therapist, but I am a consultant. So I have people who are having specific relationship problems that come to me, or if they're having a specific issue, they will come to me and I will help them fix it. So there is a difference in that. So they said, well, since you're not a therapist like everybody else, how about we pair you with someone who is a therapist? We'll pair you with Carol Sherwood. And I said, okay. And when we did it, she said, she's got this creative streak. And she suggested that we turn critical race theory into a person. So Instead of saying critical race theory has a problem because, and as a social psychologist, I can tell you, turning something into a story embeds it more deeply into your brain, into the parts of your brain that make your life choices. So it's far more powerful than just giving you a bullet point list of where critical race theory goes wrong. So she realistically has the critical race theory as a person go to her for therapy. A young Black person goes to her for therapy, but because she's white, she pulled all of the terminology, the buzzwords out of, white fragility and, all of this anti-white, anti-racism, what they called anti-racism, which is really anti-white. Critical race theory was using all of that and just completely dismissed everything she said. Now, we had critical race theory come to Carol because it was causing so much trouble in their workplace that their bosses said, you need to work on this or we're going to fire you, which is realistic. If you go in with a sense of victimhood and entitlement, you create absolute havoc in your workplace, in your family group, in your friendship group. So realistically, they went to see her. So they didn't want to be with somebody who wasn't Black. So then they sent critical race theory to me. So hypothetically, they come to me and they expect me to embrace everything critical race theory stands for, but I'm too well educated and too knowledgeable to buy it. So they looked at me and said, oh, Black woman, natural hair, this person must be on my side. I was on their side, but I was on their side of healing, not enabling destructive perceptions and ideals that were ruining their life. So we both did it in a very realistic way. One of the things I mentioned before the show is that writing it was so interesting that Carol and I wrote a short film script where we turned critical race theory into a young woman. And I wrote the script because I have more knowledge of Black culture, of course, than Carol does. But it's not intended as a put down of people who are hurting, people who face discrimination, none of that, because again, I faced it too. But it shows realistically how this way out is not taking them anywhere they want to go. So if you know anybody that would be interested in turning this into a short film, have them get in touch with me, because I think it would be very powerful and we could get people from all sides of politics to actually watch it and understand the message that's in it.
I love that. Yeah, I think that would be a fascinating short film to watch. Gosh, I want to talk. I'm doing my internship at an addiction treatment center, and our primary modalities that we use are CBT. And I've been told by a number of professors that CBT is inappropriate to use for Black clients. And, that's kind of like one of your first lines of defense. Like one of your gold standard therapies is CBT. And, I'm learning this in the classroom that rationality is racist and things like that. And, in practice, my Black and Hispanic clients seem to be very grateful for these type of tools because they feel empowering, right? So it feels like my experience is the opposite of what I'm learning in the classroom.
Yeah, no surprise. Because again, the left progressive movement since the 60s, and I mean, when you start studying it, look and trying to look and see how far back does this go? It went back all the way to, the Cold War. Since the 60s, they've been putting people in place that are promoting mindsets that are destructive on an individual basis and on a collective basis. And telling, CBT is not appropriate for Black clients. Why not? I just think taking a main tool away, Malcolm X says the biggest enemy to the Black man is the white liberal. And he also said in a separate talk that the Democrat party is playing black people for a fool. And if you vote for them, you're not only stupid, you're a traitor to your race. So some people can see it. I mean, we're talking, he was in the 60s. This is in the 60s, before he was assassinated. He was in the 60s, okay? It is not true. You can use CBT on anyone who's receptive. Treating us like this special pariah group, how racist is that? First of all, we all don't think alike. I mean, how many black people do you know that have had my life experience? I mean, it's just, they're so racist, these left-wing people. Oh my God.
What bugs me so much is like, okay, you're saying that, say a white man like me has had a lot of privilege, so maybe I don't need as much care as, say, a black person who may have had a harder life. Okay, let's accept that premise. But their solution is to give you subpar care. That just blows my mind.
Well, also, too, even with the racism that I've faced, you notice I also mentioned the privilege that I've also received, because I'm a social psychologist. One of the differences between a clinical and a social psychologist is that from the very beginning, we're not taught to be P-centric. We're not taught to just try to understand the person's perception of life and how they see the world and their emotions or whatever. We're also taught to look at, okay, what else is in their environment? How is that impacting this person? How are they impacting the other people in their apartment, in their environment? So we're taught to look in both directions. So I have an ex-husband who was white and has a really good, had a good job now. But if you look at upbringing, he had a much tougher upbringing than I did. Much tougher. And to assume that everything was so hard. Well, I had 2 married parents. I mean, we were broke. But I had 2 married parents all through my life until my dad died. My mom read something that said that kids did better, black kids did better if they didn't live in all black neighborhoods. So she moved us out of an all black neighborhood when I was like 7. Talked my dad into it, because she of course wouldn't have done anything without his approval. So we integrated an all white neighborhood. And she also learned private schools. Well, private school was too expensive, sent us to Catholic school. That works. So you look at my parents, my dad dropped out of high school. He went back and got another education, but my mom has an associate's degree. They have 5 daughters, 4 of whom have bachelor's degrees, 3 of whom have master's degrees on top of the bachelor degree, and 1 of whom has a doctorate from Stanford. The probability of people with that income level, with my dad being enlisted military, having that much education, is very low. Why did it happen? Because she said, look, as long as you're willing to work for it, you can do anything you want. And she didn't have us around other people who told us the white man won't let you do. Teaching black people they can never succeed like critical race theory does. You'll never be accepted. Oh my God, that's horrible. And it's not true. Critical race theory has a lot to answer for. It is creating another generation of victims. White, oh, by the way, audience members, if you have white guilt, get rid of it. If you didn't do it, you're not responsible for it, okay?
Do you think critical race theory impacts people's mental health in terms of like seeing potential threats in the world everywhere?
Absolutely. And while I said there is a difference in how people are treated, they talk about microaggressions. I didn't say microaggressions. I said nonverbal behaviors. One of the things I noticed when I moved to Australia is that people would look me in the eye longer. They would smile. They'd initiate conversation. I got so used to that when I went back to the States, white people in the States talked to me more. Why? Because I didn't have the same defensive posture I'd had before. It goes both ways. Everything's multiple directions.
It seems like this creates like this vicious spiral downwards where it's like, I'm going to become distrusting of you and kind of keep you at arm's length. And then I'm going to respond to you by doing the same thing. And we kind of, it's like by adopting this ideology, assuming that people of another race are a threat, it's like it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Absolutely. And also, even living in California is not, known for its racist policies. But even living in California, I saw a difference. And it wasn't something I intentionally did. It was just living in a place where people were not afraid of me, didn't assume they knew everything about me because of the way I looked. And after a while, I adjusted to that. I adapted to it. And I took the way I carried myself back to the States with me and got treated completely differently. So you want to get rid of a lot of bias. You can't only work on one side. You can't say to people, you have to be overly nice to Black people. Well, how about Black people responding? They need to learn how to act too. Otherwise, it won't work. So, and critical race theory, saying you'll never be accepted, oh my God, microaggressions everywhere. So every time you're standing there and you've got this scowl on your face, and every time somebody looks at you, oh, they're just racist against me. No, they don't like you because you look hostile. Try walking. I even tried this with a girlfriend. She's like, oh, white people are this and that. And I said, okay, let's go to a place. It's all white people. And okay, we're going to change your nonverbal behavior. Move your arms like this. Put a smile on your face. Turn your legs like this. Everybody came and talked to us. When is the last time you heard anybody talk about this? No, because everybody only does one side. As a social psychologist, I do both sides. So if you want to get rid of bias, that's what Healing the Rift, my Healing the Rift program does. It's not just enough to get rid of bias on one side. You need the other side to respond appropriately or it doesn't last. Every time I look on social media, I see another group of Black people fighting in an airport or throwing things at a fast food restaurant or on a cruise ship acting like they have no sense. How in the world does that help us? You want to be accepted? Act like you have some sense. Because every time those people misbehave, people look at me and think I'm just like them. I pay a price for that behavior. And it's human nature. Human nature. We all stereotype. It's shortcut for the brain. So, but we can fix it. But we have to be willing to have tough conversations. We have to be willing to hold all sides accountable. We have to have tips people can use right away that work. But right now, that whole anti-racist movement just vilified white people. How is that going to help anybody? You have so many aggressive Black people on social media talking about how much they hate white people. And if you told them, okay, if a white person did this, how would you respond? Oh, we'd march, we did. Turnabout's fair play. I even am followed by people who really don't like Black people very much. I'm followed on social, because I'm mad at you. I'm not going to, freedom means you have a freedom to dislike, okay? I'm not saying you have to like Black people.
I'll say that's kind of impressive, though. I think that says something about your intellect and your output of production, that someone who doesn't like Black people is still following you.
And more than one. And I would say, and they've said, if other Black people acted like you, we wouldn't have a problem. Act like you have sense. Treat others the way you want to be treated. I don't believe I have to accept every type of lifestyle or behavior pattern. I will not. I do not. But I treat everyone with basic civility and kindness. We do that, we all get along.
So I've got two questions left for you, and the first one was when you look at the therapy profession and all that's gone wrong in therapy, like what was documented in this book. When you look at that, how do we fix the therapy profession?
We have to have more brave people who are willing to write like that, who are willing to teach like that. We need people who aren't in the therapy field to realize how important it is to have the mental health field captured by activists. Because with so many people seeking mental health, I would say alleviation or healing, that's a lot of power for this group. Therapists have a lot of power. And if they are really biased and bring that bias into their therapy, then their therapy becomes about promoting their belief system and not about healing, helping the person who's in that chair heal. And I think it's gotten way late a long time ago. You have to believe this, you have to believe that. And stop teaching people to reject anyone whose values are different. I know people who've been rejected by therapists because they have more conservative political beliefs. How is that fair? So I have to embrace your left-wing beliefs, or I can't get help for my addiction issue, or you won't tell me how to handle my mother-in-law who's driving me around the bend, or whatever I'm in there dealing with, unless I also pretend at least to embrace your left-wing values. How is that duty of care to the patient? And by the way, if you get grief about being a white male, send them to me. I'm more than happy to take them on.
I would love to. So my final question to you is, when you look at society more broadly, what is one issue that we're not talking about enough that we should be talking about more?
How to fix it. I think one of the things that differentiates me from a lot of people out there talking about various issues is that I give very specific information about how to fix things. I don't believe in talking about a problem unless you have a solution. So we need more people to put their heads together. I look at, for instance, one issue that isn't talked about enough that I would like to help participate in fixing, and that's the toxicity of the Black community. Black culture is toxic, and it needs to be fixed. And you cannot get a group of empowered Black people to talk about it. Everybody wants to blame white people. Everybody wants to excuse it. Oh, because of slavery and whatever. Ask the Poles. Every time somebody gets a bee in their bonnet, they conquer Poland. Seriously, if you want to look at a group of people that have gone through a lot of crap, or the Alsace-Lorraine in France, constantly going back and forth, everybody's always conquering them. Everybody has gone through enormous pain. What do we do about it now needs to be the question. How do we fix it? And that's what I think needs to be focused on. And as I said, as a Black person, I am quite disheartened by the fact that more than 90% of Black Americans are completely captured by the entitled victimhood that is being promoted by the Democrat Party, and don't recognize that our culture really needs to be fixed, or we're going to kill ourselves off.
Are you encouraged at all by like a rightward shift politically among African Americans?
Somewhat, but there's still many of the people who call themselves Black conservatives feel obligated to buy into to mindsets like there's no racism doesn't hold you back, whatever. That's not true. What we need to teach is there are going to be people who are racist against you. Here's how you handle it. Here's how you overcome that. Not to pretend it's not there. There are a lot of whites, especially conservative whites, who want to think racism is imaginary. And it's one of my few issues with Charlie Kirk, because I find so much of what he does so useful. And oh, by the way, I don't have a mindset that says I have to agree with you 100% or I reject you. So I really value what he does. But when he says stuff like there's no, privilege attached to being white in a majority white country, if our country was blue, majority blue, being blue would have an advantage attached to it, because you would be perceived as part of the empowered group. You'd be seen as when people say somebody looks all American, they don't mean a black person or an Asian, they mean a white person. But if you're willing to say, okay, there is this, and here's what we do about it, you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You just fix it. It often requires a tweak, not a revolution.
That's a fascinating answer. I mean, this whole conversation has been so fascinating. I feel like I could just stay here all night and the next day just listening to you talk. Everything you say has just got my mind captivated. Dr. McMillan, where can people find you?
Well, I would say if this airs after the 1st of August, I have a new website that is going up, so you can reach it two ways. You can reach it www.drdinamcmillan.com, or you can reach it through my business, Ethical Strategic Solutions. So you would do www.ethicalstrategic.com. So I made it so you can reach it both ways. You can also just look up, if you don't want to know how to spell my name, just look up Dr. Dina and put TEDx, and you'll find my TED Talk, and you'll know how to spell my name. So you can Google me and find all kinds of things. You can watch my Heart and Mind show. I broadcast it live on X through my X profile. So at Dr. Dina 1. That's really easy. DRDINA 1 on X. And I have lots of information. I've got I actually live stream my show from there. You can find it on Facebook or go on Rumble and put it Heart and Mind with Dr. Dina McMillan. Find all my shows. So everything tells you how to talk. But I'm so excited about my new website, because it's also going to link to my YouTube page, which I'm making public again, where I'm going to be posting informative videos so people can learn things through the videos I'm putting back on my YouTube page. But it's almost done. So first week of August, it goes live again.
Dr. Dina McMillan, thank you so much. This was fascinating. I would love to talk to you again anytime.
Well, call me when you need me. Now that you know me, if somebody's giving you grief and you're like, nah, I can't handle this. They're not going to listen to me. Oh, Dina said I could call her. So yeah, let me talk to them.
I will, absolutely.